In the news tonight, 2 doctors positive for COVID-19. All containment areas maintained. And vaccination rolls out in Nandi and Lautoka.
From the studios of FBC Suva, Edwin Nandi.
Bulawinaka, Fiji. 2 doctors at the Lautoka and a 30-year-old doctor. At the moment, there is no trace of how they contracted COVID-19.
We are early in our investigation, but at this stage, they do not appear to be connected to any of our existing cases or events of interest, such as the Tavakumbu funeral. Also, while they did work in the hospital, they did not work in the isolation ward, where they would have had interaction with COVID-positive patients. So while we are very early in this investigation, we must treat these cases as instances of community transmission until it is proven otherwise.
And Christiana Uluwai joins us live now. Christiana, what immediate steps has the ministry taken for all those who came into contact with these cases?
Edwin, all contacts within the hospital will be screened, tested and isolated as per protocol. As you can imagine, this is a massive and complex undertaking for the hospital. But the Health Ministry has reassured Lautoka Hospital that they will be provided the help and support that they need. And this includes sending in medical teams from other medical facilities to replace staff who may have been identified as close contact and will need to be isolated.
Christiana, did these doctors have the Care Fiji app?
Edwin, fortunately, both of these staff have the Care Fiji app installed and running. And while the contact tracing team are on the ground manually doing their work, a digital net is being cast far and wide to Fijians who may have come into contact with these 2 doctors. If there's one thing, Edwin, that these recent cases identify, it's the ease and efficiency of having the Care Fiji app in terms of tracking down this virus. Edwin.
Vinaka Christiana, the Ministry of Health has narrowed down the number of work contacts for case number 113, the garment factory employee, from 877 to 791. Permanent Secretary for Health, Dr. James Fong, says they have tested all these individuals plus secondary contacts, with all 791 testing negative. He says they continue to investigate whether there are other contacts that need to be screened.
While we do not have any positive result yet from the contacts of the 2 garment factories, that could change at any point throughout the 14-day incubation period for the virus. That is why these contacts are all under the home quarantine order that will last 2 weeks from their last contact with case 113.
And joining us live now is Aquila Dama. Aquila, does this mean that the garment factory workers are now safe?
We may not have any positive results yet from the contacts at the 2 garment factories. However, that could change at any point throughout the 14-day incubation window for the virus. That is why these contacts are all under a home quarantine order that will last 2 weeks from their last contact with case 113. Because of the quick action to contain the garment factory staff, if any do develop the virus, it will be securely detected while they are in quarantine. Now, however, Dr. Fong said there was one reason above all as to how everyone linked to case 113 was successfully located. You know how? Or you know why? Because the more than 300,000 people living in the Suva-Nosori corridor did their jobs on the weekend by staying home. Edwin.
Vinaka Aquila, the Health Ministry is now in talks with the Education Ministry to reopen schools on the 24th of this month. Permanent Secretary Dr. James Fong says in-class learning is important. However, any decision on children returning to school will be made after assessing the situation on the ground on or near the 24th.
It depends entirely on the COVID-19 situation at that time. Still, I want parents and students watching to know that getting your children back into the classrooms is an urgent priority for the Ministry of Health. Until such times, parents must keep their children at home. Do not bring them shopping. Do not send them out with friends. Please keep them at home.
The Ministry of Health has lifted the lockdown initially implemented on Moturiki Island. 3 individuals from Naidambedambe village on the island had interacted with the 53-year-old woman during the super spreader funeral at Tavakumbu in Lautoka. They have successfully completed their 14-day quarantine and their test results are all negative.
So the lockdown of the island is lifted. However, as is the case with all our rural and maritime communities, we encourage families on Moturiki to stay where you are, stay at home, limit your movement as far as possible.
Nanunga is live with us. Josiah, what more information was given out about the ministry's containment and contact tracing efforts?
Edwin, the Health Ministry's contact tracing is progressing well, with only one exception. This is regarding a team that participated during the Malomalo Sevens that was held at Lawanga Park in Singatoka from the 16th to the 17th of last month, which the ministry have not fully accounted for. Now, the team is called Lionheart. Information gathered that players shared the hostel and interacted with our COVID-19 case number 98. Dr. James Fong is urging and reminding the players, or anyone for that matter who interacted with the players, to please contact the number 158 if they haven't been contacted by any of the contact tracing team or health officials. Once again, the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Health is urging and reminding the players of Lionheart, or anyone for that matter who interacted with the players after the Malomalo Sevens that was held last month in Singatoka, to please call the number 158 if they haven't been contacted by any of the health officials team. As for the containment zones, Edwin, there are currently 6 active containment zones across the country. This includes Suba, Lami, Nosori, Rakiraki, Lautoka and Nandi. Now, Dr. James Fong is urging and reminding Fijians to limit border movement, and the ministry is not even considering lifting all these restrictions, as it is still unclear with the risks posed. And this will all determine after all the testing, the screening, and this will eventually require more time. Edwin.
Nakachosaya, food pack rations that were activated during the lockdown period over the weekend ended this morning. Permanent Secretary for Health Dr. James Fong says further plans for future food distribution services will be advised by the Ministry of Economy tomorrow.
I want to make it clear here. We ran this program for those in the lockdown areas because they could not access supermarkets or shops. With supermarkets and shops opening from the early hours of this morning, our food pack assistance is no longer in place.
And Apanisa Wangairandovu joins us live now. Now, Apanisa, Dr. Fong has spoken about measures at the quarantine facilities. What changes?
Edwin, Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Health, Dr. James Fong, today highlighted that they are setting up more CCTV cameras in quarantine facilities. This is for the purpose of easing their contact tracing as well as the safety and the security of those inside these centers. Also today, he spoke about the capacity or the quarantine capacity, which is right now 12%. And the Permanent Secretary has also confirmed today that they are not looking into opening schools as isolation centers. Edwin.
Panisa, and up ahead, surge in domestic violence reports. And Fiji media adapt to COVID-19. Welcome back. Hundreds of people lined up at Prince Charles Park in Nandi today to get their COVID-19 jabs. Fijians were seen lining up from 8 a.m. outside the park, even though vaccination was scheduled to start at 9. Felipe Naikaso has more.
Residents of Nandi made it their civic duty to be at Prince Charles Park today in order to assist in the return to normalcy.
Yes, it's very important because we'll be sure that virus won't affect us now once the vaccination is done.
Fijians weren't too bothered with the long lines at Prince Charles Park here today, with some even waiting for more than 2 hours. What they've told me is that it was important to get the jabs, especially during this time.
2 hours or 4 hours doesn't matter now. It's a matter of life and death, and I think everybody should come and do it, and take time, because when you can be in the line in supermarket or in fish market, why can't here?
Members of the disciplined forces were assisting the medical team. Those over 60 had a separate line, while those who registered online got their jabs quickly. Fijians have been encouraged to get their jabs as it's important for the country.
Message I want to tell them, so make sure you have to vaccinate it because of this virus is so dangerous.
The campaign will continue until Friday. People in Lautoka are getting vaccinated at Tilak High School. Philippe Naikaso, FBC News.
And busy areas of the Central Division were abuzz since sunrise this morning, with people coming out from 56 hours of lockdown. While there was a visible increase in people wearing face masks, the risk of not maintaining physical distancing remained a concern. Apanisa Wangairandovu went around Suva today and files this report.
This was Suva this morning.
People have been coming out in numbers. The message from the Health Ministry is to remain alert and only move around if necessarily needed.
So the operators are very, very mindful, and they are all supporting the initiative of the government.
The supermarket remains on strict watch. You can only go in if mask on.
Many Fijians coming to town did not bother to follow social distancing, which was a concern for others.
I think in Fiji, a lot of people don't know the seriousness of this disease.
This has been the scene outside most supermarkets in the Central Division this morning. People coming out to buy groceries.
Because of the lockdown, we were all at home. We couldn't do our shopping on the fest, so we had to come today in this big lineup.
There is fear the influx of people coming to the main city may increase, as this is also the week social pensioners will be receiving their payout. Apinis Wangrandobu, FBC News.
More than 60% of Fijian women have been victims of violent and abusive partners, and their vulnerability is heightened during COVID-19 lockdowns. Christiana Uluwai reports the authorities are calling on Fijians to look out for one another, especially vulnerable women, during this outbreak.
While staying at home saves lives, for women in abusive relationship, the situation is often a living nightmare.
If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please call the National Domestic Violence Helpline number 1560.
Fiji Women Crisis Center Coordinator Shamima Ali says there is a surge in calls on the helpline.
From the 19th to the 25th of April, there definitely has been a spike. Particularly in Nandi, we have had, and a total of 62 from all our branches.
Ali says there are existing collaborations where help is available to the victims.
The police, main partners, and we have an understanding to contact them, and they have been very helpful in these past 2 weeks.
According to the United Nations, 30% of women on average across the world experience some form of physical or sexual abuse, mostly by an intimate partner before the pandemic. However, this figure doubled in Fiji, where some 64% of women say they had been the target of some form of abuse. Christiana Uluwai, FBC News.
Members of the media have time and again put their safety second as they work to get out as much information as possible to the public. As hundreds of thousands commemorate World Media Freedom Day today, the media are having to leave loved ones behind, adapt to COVID-19 safety measures, and work to continue to inform the people. Lena Rees has more.
In a time where movement is restricted, people are more hungry for information to which the media caters for.
For our viewers, for our listeners, asking the question on their behalf, on the numbers, on the restriction that is in place. And for us journalists, our work is to inform our viewers the best information on the COVID-19.
Journalists around the world have died from reporting on the COVID-19 pandemic, a risk the Fiji media is not exempted from.
The journalists are they're taking risks, and they are making sure they adhere to all their safety procedures, because if they don't do so, they might bring it back to their colleagues or bring it back home.
Social media has also, in a way, played a part in holding the media to account, and this has caused them to push even further in delivering information.
Every media person deserves a salute today, because they have done exceptionally well and have put their own interests secondary and have put the reporting and letting people of Fiji know what's happening.
World Media Freedom Day is observed on the 3rd of May every year to encourage and develop initiatives in favor of press freedom and to assess the state of press freedom worldwide. Lena Rees, FBC News.
Still to come, India's government ignored variant warnings. And later on in sports, Fiji FA juggles sporting calendar.
Slow supply of sugar in the Greater Suva area is affecting bakeries which rely heavily on the efficiency of this supply. Some bakery owners say they are incurring high operational costs during this period. Christiana Ulwai reports.
Fiji's largest bakery chain, the Hot Bread Kitchen, is exploring natural sweetness to address the slow supply of sugar into the Suva containment zone.
And we are very mindful that there seems to be a growing scarcity of sugar in Fiji. We are exploring ways to use natural sweetness. And to be honest, for the bakeries in the West and Lemi confinement zone, sugar is not so much of an issue.
Bakewell Fiji Managing Director Rohit Deo says that they had to look for backup sugar supplies in order to remain in business.
We have to hunt for it, request the companies or suppliers. There are some suppliers where we generally bought the sugars area on, but still they only supply a limit because they are also concerned of the consumers at the same time.
Although the expenses will be typically higher during this period, Deo reassures that the price of their goods will remain the same.
The expense is a bit high, but we have to also consider our customers, our genuine customers.
Both of these bakeries are one of the few that remain operational, as some have chosen to close down during this containment period. Christiana Uluwai, FBC News.
The Reserve Bank, in its latest economic review, says while progress has been made on the vaccination front, with over 50,000 people receiving their first dose, the recent locally transmitted cases and subsequent containment measures will further prolong the already subdued economic activity. The RBF says sectoral performance remained mixed up to March. Electricity and mahogany production declined annually, the latter of which was due to a halt in production earlier in the year. However, the pine industry noted a boost in production for pine logs, wood chip and saw timber on the back of increased demand. Similarly, gold production also picked up over the year, owing to better quality ore grade mined. Here are the local exchange rates as set early this morning. The Fiji dollar rose against the two major trading partners, the Aussie and Kiwi dollars, as well as the euro. The Sangomoli fell against the Chinese yuan, US dollar, PNG kina and the Japanese yen. Prices were mixed on the commodities market. Crude oil dropped at $63 a barrel. Gold rose a dollar, closing at $1,772 per ounce, and silver closed down at $25.91 per ounce. Sanifa from HFC Bank joins us now to give us the latest from the money markets.
Good evening. The Forex market has started out the week with the new month pretty much where they left off on Friday. Australian job advertisements climbed for an 11th straight month in April to reach their highest in 12 years, suggesting strong demand for labour will withstand the removal of some government emergency support programs. Figures showed total job ads grew 4.7% in April from March, while unemployment has fallen much quicker than policymakers expected. The Reserve Bank of Australia is aiming to drive unemployment down to 4% or even lower in the hope of finally lifting wage growth and inflation after years of tepid gains. Meanwhile, the US dollar clung to a recent bounce today, as investors made a cautious start to a week crammed with central bank meetings and big-ticket U.S. economic data, looking for clues on the outlook for global inflation and for policymakers' response. That's all for now from HFC Bank.
Fijians in containment zones in the central and western divisions are once again encouraged to work on the Home Garden Initiative. The Agriculture Ministry provides seedlings under this initiative to help Fijians grow their own vegetables. Jeshulal reports.
The ultimate aim is to maintain food security in the lockdown and containment zones.
We know that supply has exceeded demand in this particular point in time. There's various reasons for that. Not only that the supply has increased because we have worked very closely with the farmers, but also there is subdued demand due to the particular situation that we have now.
This year, with the current situation we've got, we've decided to actually, complement that effort, upscale that effort, and actually go to each of these households, giving them the seed packets so they can utilize the free time that they've currently got.
Dr. Reddy says the COVID-19 pandemic has boosted the supply chain.
Now expanding our seed distribution program that we started last year when the COVID-19 started in Fiji. We have to date distributed 52,000 packages to various households over the last 12 months.
The Agricultural Ministry, with the help of the Fiji Police Force, has distributed more than 52,000 packages of seeds in the last 12 months. Jeshulal, FBC News.
That is the latest from my end, but coming up after the break, the first female student of Budalewa Secondary School shares her experience. Stay with us.
On its inception in 1921, Budalewa Secondary School in Taveuni was an all-male institution, and it produced some of Fiji's well-known figures. In 1974, the school opened its doors to its first female student, Unaisa Satini. Eleanor Turangaivu caught up with her and files this story.
"60-year-old Unaisa Satini was born and bred in Lobonibonu, Taveuni in the late 1960s and attended primary school in Somosomo. Although life was not easy, Satini enjoyed school.
Back then, we would walk to school along the long, dusty road. Copra was our main source of income. Education was priority in our home.
Satini considered herself a cheeky girl who would always get into trouble, and she believes this was the reason her grandfather chose to send her to Budalewa Secondary School, making her the first female to attend the all-male institution.
Whatever the boys did, I had to do it too. If they were told to run, I would run too. To crawl, I would too. I ended up acting like a boy because of it.
Being the only female had its pros and cons. While she was always the teacher's favorite, Satini was also subjected to bullying. It was there that she taught herself to stand tall.
Only the boys would get disciplined from the teachers, but as time went, I would also be disciplined. It was tough during that time, but I always told myself, take it like a man.
Satini has lived with this principle her whole life, which she says has taught her to be strong and independent. Eleanor Turangevio, FBC News.
And tonight, FBC News speaks with the Fiji Media Association General Secretary Stanley Simpson on World Media Freedom Day and how journalists are having to adapt to changes over the years in the industry.
What are some of the changes you've seen over the years?
We've been through, almost like I would say a frontline war zone kind of situation in Fiji. But I've taken my hat off for those in the media that have hung on, and I'm really grateful, and I really admire many of the younger journalists coming in now.
Do you think social media, in a way, plays that role to hold them to account?
Well, it's almost direct feedback, and some of it can be brutal feedback. Obviously, you get sometimes some praise that make you feel good. People say, "Oh, wonderful report," but it goes both ways. And yes, we have to be accountable.
What is your message to them as they overcome these challenges, as they try to work around things like COVID-19?
Every time, your sacrifice is not in vain. It's a job, but you're also doing it for the people, because it's easy for you to just put your pens down and say, "Oh, there's no one there today, we're going to home and wait for tomorrow." But I know how journalists work the extra mile to find out the information that the public is wanting.
And now we join Talay for all the latest in sports.
Good evening. Ahead in sports, growing interest for Fijian Rua coaching post. And Fiji FA plans for competition calendar. Is there more coming up? The Fiji Rugby Union has made it clear that it will appoint the best possible coach for the Fijian Drua. The Drua coach and CEO's positions were advertised over the weekend. FRU Chief Executive John O'Connor says some high-profile coaches are interested to guide the Drua next season. Some of them have even coached national teams.
Even before the applications were advertised, the applicants we've received come throughout the world. People who coached professional clubs in UK, in France, and other coaches who've coached national teams.
Fitness is still an issue for the Tailevu provincial side in the Skipper Provincial Cup competition. With no wins so far this season, manager Epeli Sovalevu says a lot of challenges were needed to be met in the start of the season with new management and coach. Sovalevu says fitness is foremost, which needs to be fixed before the season resumes.
The thing is, the team's fitness does not match the Skipper Cup level of competition. We really want to focus on that side before the season resumes. With COVID, we know it will be an issue, but we will have to work something out.
There is a possibility the Digicel Fiji Fest will be held in November, similar to last season. The Fiji Football Association is juggling its sporting calendar as it waits for directives from the Ministry of Health to resume sporting events. The Fiji FA is planning ahead as COVID-19 brings a cloud of doubt on future sporting events.
For the Digital Fiji Fact, it all depends on the type of relaxation the government makes.
The association is considering pushing some competitions to next year, with the exception of the National League.
If it's further delayed, then we'll have to look at all the other options of completing some even next year, early next year. Anything happens, league has to finish because that's our premier product.
But in the meantime, district teams are focusing on maintaining the players' fitness.
All I ask my boys is just to train and keep fit so that whenever the training starts, we are already there. We do not need to start again from the scratch. We want to be somewhere in fitness.
I think the players, they know very well that safety comes first. I think once everyone is safe, then the league will start. So in that safe space, they are trying their best to just do the individual training.
The Digicel Premier League was planned to resume this weekend, with the Fiji Fest scheduled for next week. But both have been shifted to later dates, depending on the approval by the Health Ministry. Talima Terukula, FBC Sports. Manchester United's Premier League match against Liverpool this morning was postponed after fans stormed the pitch. This report from TVNZ. In today's Play of the Day, we are not going to look at how best a try was scored, but how it was celebrated. This one's from the Panthers and Sea Eagles NRL match on the weekend. In our quickie spot of the day, are you a cycling and football fan? What if you combine the two sports? Would you like it? Did you know that cycle ball has been around for over a century? And that's it from sports. After the break, an artist makes portraits for the homeless to help them in their next step of life. This and more coming up.
A trough of low pressure remains slow-moving just northeast of Fiji and is moving further away from the country. Meanwhile, another trough approaches the group from the west and is expected to gradually move eastwards over Fiji and affect the country until Wednesday. In the west, mostly cloudy and humid conditions. Eastwards from Pacific Harbour to Suva, cloudy, a little morning rain followed by heavy showers in the afternoon. In the north, breezy this morning with occasional rain and a thunderstorm or two. there were heavy showers in the afternoon as well. At sea, southeasterly winds 20 to 25 knots, rough seas, moderate southerly swells, poor visibility in areas of heavy rain and thunderstorms. The next high tide is at 44 minutes past midnight, with low tide at 6:41 a.m. Sunrise is at 6:21 tomorrow. Outlook for tomorrow for Viti Levu, Kandavu and nearby smaller islands and southern Lao group. Occasional rain and a few thunderstorms with heavy falls. Localized heavy falls may lead to flash flooding of low-lying areas for the rest of Fiji. Cloudy with some showers, increasing to rain tomorrow and becoming frequent with isolated heavy falls. And looking on to Wednesday, occasional showers and a few thunderstorms over most places. And in Fijian Pulse, we ask, did people abuse the food rations meant for needy families?
People really abused it. And I think it would have been done better if, the people that really needed it would have received it, but instead it went to the people that really don't need it.
Yeah, I think it was given to the right people. Since they are going through the lockdown period, there was no other shop open, so they don't have any other choice.
Yes, of course. I believe people should always be prepared and always do extra shopping.
Of course, they all should be prepared for these hard times as we're going through the COVID-19.
In Santa Ana, California, in the United States, an artist paints colorfully authentic portraits of people experiencing homelessness. Proceeds from each portrait go to its subject, supporting their next steps and furthering their dreams.
Everybody was always telling those experiencing homelessness who they have become. My paintings speak into who they are becoming. My name is Brian Peterson. I live in Santa Ana, California, and I paint portraits of my neighbors experiencing homelessness. My creative process starts with really trying to see who they are beneath homelessness. And then I just go for it. And I use the proceeds from the sold paintings to help them pursue their dreams, desires, wishes, goals, and ultimately build friendship. Art is a form of worship. With every painting that I do, I tell the subject, you and I are the artists. It's a dignifying moment to just let them be a part of the process. I'm asking, who is this person? People are way more than their circumstance. They have dreams, they have goals. Every human being is a masterpiece. What do you see? Confidence. Painting for me is also about legacy. The stories that we told will remain.
Recapping our main stories, 2 doctors test positive for COVID-19, all containment areas maintained, and vaccination rolls out in Nandi and Lautoka. For these stories and others, you can tune in daily to our sister radio station Gold FM. To our poll question, last week we asked, should face masks be made mandatory? 80% of respondents answered yes. This week we are asking, do you think some Fijians were lying to get food rations in the Suvarnasori corridor? Visit our FBC News website to answer. And you can send us newsworthy pictures and videos. Email fbcnews@fbc.com.fj or share it with us via our various social media accounts, including Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. You can also download our FBC app to keep updated with the very latest in news and sports and listen to our 6 radio stations live. That's your news this evening. I'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Modemanta.